Welcome everyone to the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force fourth in this virtual summit series. And this is the fourth one in the series, Climate and Gender. And we're going to start with a land acknowledgement by Karina Gould, the tribal chair of the Confederated Villages of Lejeune and co-founder of the Sogorea Land Trust, born and raised in Oakland on this territory of Huichin. She's a beautiful Indigenous activist, organizer, and a co-founder and lead organizer for Indian People Organizing for Change and Sogorea Land Trust. And if you haven't done it already, pay your Shumi tax, and I'm going to put that in the chat. So take it away, Karina. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's always great to be in space and place with you all. Thanks for inviting me to come and open us up and just ground us. Over the last few months, we have all been dealing with a lot in this world, and so often I'll ask us to take some breaths, and I think that's a good way to just do it, just ground ourselves because we often go from one Zoom to the next meeting without doing that. But we're starting this first thing in the morning, and so it's good for us. It's good for me to remember to breathe because sometimes as we're going throughout the day, with so many things happening, we forget to do that work of breathing and bringing in that air. And so we're going to ask our lungs to help us out and bring in some good air. And we're going to let go of stuff that we don't need. And so let's take in a deep breath from the top of your head and just let it fill up your lungs. And then we're going to let it go. And as we're letting it go, we're going to let go of anything and any bad conversations we might have already had this morning, any bad traffic that might have happened, any of that kind of stuff that's negativity, and we're just going to let it go so we can be present here today. So let's take a deep breath together and we breathe in, hold it, and let it go. And I say thank you to our cloud relatives for bringing us rain. We ask them to continue to do their life work and bringing us fresh water for the next 7 generations and beyond that help us to help our plant relatives, our medicine relatives, our food relatives that are help us to sustain our life and to continue to do their work through to continue to bring us that fresh water for the next 7 generations and beyond. We take in a deep breath. Hold it. And we let it go. We thank our Mother Earth for holding us up today as we wake up, and Ishmin, our sun, who is our fire, for warming us on this day, our star relatives, our ancestors that guide us and help us to get to the next place. We say thank you to all of them. We take in a deep breath and we let it go. I offer up a prayer for all of our relatives that are displaced and living without a roof over their head. We pray for their comfort, for warmth, for security, for us as human beings to remember to be human beings, and that these are all our relatives and all of our responsibilities to take care of. And we ask that in this lifetime that we ensure that there is human rights to have homes and human rights to have medical and human rights to have food and water, and that we remember our place in the circle of life. We take in a deep breath. Let it go. We pray for all of our relatives across the world that are dealing with oppression and war and fascism and things that do not serve us. We ask for courage and strength and hope and resiliency for us and our relatives to stand up and to say and do the right things in this time when all of the things that are happening to this earth is calling on us to change the ways of human beings to come back in right relation. And take in a deep breath. Let it go. In this time of winter, we pray for our elders. We ask that they have enough nourishment and food and warmth and kinship. And we thank them for their life work and for giving us the time and to be those culture bearers and those language carriers and those song carriers. And we thank them for their lives, and we ask that we help them in this time to be comfortable. And we say special blessings and prayers for those of our relatives that are making their way through the Western Gate that have recently passed over. We ask that they are met by the relatives and language and song and joy, and that those of us that are left behind feel a little lighter knowing that they are on the other side. And take a deep breath and let it go. We say a special blessing and prayer for our young people and for our children and for our babies and for those yet to be born. And we ask that we come together and work side by side with our youth so that we could create a world that is better for all of them and for the next 7 generations and those yet to be born. We take a deep breath and let it go. We say a special blessing and prayer for our two-spirit, non-binary relatives that are continuously under attack, that are continuously um, working to do the good work to bring us back in balance, and that we ask for special blessing and prayers over their life and their magic. And take a deep breath. Let it go. I ask relatives that we open up our minds, our hearts, our spirits to each other today as we do this good work, and we continue to work with other people and to share good laughter and joy and songs and dances and celebrations together, and that we do this in a good way. And we take that one good breath and we come back and we are here together in one mind. Yeah. Thank you, relatives. Thank you so much, Cheryl.
Thank you, Karina. Always beautiful way to start our morning. Such a blessing always when you're in the room. So thank you so much. It's wonderful to see you. Happy New Year in this genocide that we live in today. Um, I have to say that because I can't really say that we're happy. So anyway, thank you so much. So yeah, now we're gonna get started with our first speakers after I do my little welcome. So um, welcome to the Climate and Gender. This is the CEMTF's, the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force, fourth virtual summit series. The whole series name is Climate, Social Justice, and Rights to Nature, United Action for a Just and Regenerative Future. Climate and Gender is this morning. In case you don't know me, I'm a former council member in the for the city of Berkeley and founder of the CEMTF. I'm also on a bunch of other organizations called Berkeley Equity Summit Alliance, which is a BIPOC Berkeley community members group, and Mobilize Berkeley, which is UC Berkeley and Student Environmental Resource Center. I'm on the Interfaith Council of Alameda County as an advisory committee and the network of elected officials, Friends of Adeline. So I'm kind of busy, and now I'm going out and being out in the streets to end the genocide and the occupation and to be in solidarity to free Palestine. So I've been pretty busy, and I'm so excited about climate and gender. And I want to thank you all for being here and thank the CEMTF Planning and Logistics Committee and thanking the steering committee and to our amazing fellows, Natalie, Livy, Janelle, Karis, who are working with CEMTF since this fall. And so they've been doing some great work. and they're still doing some great work. And I want to thank the speakers today, Karina, Nick, Tatum, Ethos, LZ, Amy, and Melinda. Thank you all for being here, taking time out this morning to hear so that we can hear from you. And I want to thank all who have donated or will donate. There's still time to do that. And I also want to thank Sabrina Jacobs for having me on KPFA to announce this morning. CEMTF is in its 5th year of existence, and this is our 4th summit series and the 2nd year that we've had fellows. So we're grateful and thankful for all that. And we're committed to talk about climate and topics that are not usually talked about. Excuse me. And we hope that to have an in-person celebration for our 5th anniversary with music, a little food, some drinks. So all of you, past and present, look out for that. That's coming up this spring. And for climate and gender, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, they added prevention, I guess, because it used to just be CDC. Gender is the cultural roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes expected of people based on their sex. And as of Webster, as a verb, is as in to produce. So when talking about gender, folks often refer to gender equality, gender neutral, gender nonconforming, gender disparities, transgender, gender identity, gender non-binary, gender expansive, gender minority, gender equality, gender expression, and a few terms you may have already, these are a few terms that you may already be familiar with or not, but gender continues to impact our lives. So I know as a Black woman, I've felt all the ways that me being a woman has been impacted, um, um, and the racism that goes with that. So I'm so excited to hear about what everyone has to share with us this morning. And so sit back, get your coffee, get your tea, your water, your breakfast, and let's hear from our amazing speakers to talk about climate and gender. First, we're gonna have our amazing fellows introduce each speaker. So we have fellows, names are Karis, who we'll be introducing right now, and Janelle. And then later we'll have a couple more. So thank you, Karis, for being here. It's always wonderful to have these fellows who are so smart from UC Berkeley. And good morning, LZ. Nice to see you. And go take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Hope everyone's having a good morning. First off, we have Nick Evasco using they, them pronouns. They are an organizer for environment, immigrant, and refugee rights and trans and queer liberation. Thank you so much. Take it away.
Thanks, Karis, and thanks, Cheryl. Always fun to be in the CEMTF space. It's going to take me a second to pull up my little presentation. But just to get started again, my name is Nick. I use they, them pronouns. I'm on Ohlone land in San Francisco. Been associated with CMTF in different ways since its founding. Great place, clearinghouse for great discussions. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk about a project that I've been getting off the ground for a couple years now. Can everybody see my screen okay? Cool. So one of the projects that I am working on is called Queering Green. This project was born out of my experience as an environmental organizer and activist here in the Bay Area, but also working with groups across the US. I'm an active organizer, and I work with youth, elders, folks who are new to the movement, folks who have been, OGs in the space for a long time. And I'm also a trans and person of color. Cheryl mentioned our intersecting identities and how those really impact kind of what we are able to bring to movement spaces. And for folks who have probably been in the movement for a while, you might have noticed that queer, trans, gender nonconforming people, gender expansive people might be overrepresented in our movement. And so, in the many years that I've been involved with this space, I've decided that it's time to kind of answer some of these questions, like why is that? And I'm working with an arts collective, so we're a project of Climate Creative, and we've been around for a little under a year now. We did our big launch I don't know if y'all remember, but there was a huge march in New York last September to coincide with a UN summit. And so we launched our project there. And I'm going to go through kind of what our structure is. And then I know the topic of my talk is building a home. So best practices for building a home for queer, trans, and gender expansive people. And then preview some of the work that we're doing in terms of bringing a real intersectional lens to the climate movement. And I can't see the chat, but if you have any questions, feel free to drop in the chat, and I'll try to leave some time to answer your questions. So the biggest question is why are trans, queer, and gender expansive people in the environmental movement? How can we get those folks to not just feel comfortable, but feel like they're in a position of leadership? Folks who have been in kind of movement spaces for a long time, you'll notice that they're generally safer spaces, but the folks who are maybe in leadership positions or are making a lot of decisions don't represent queer, trans, and gender expansive people. And often we're seeing predominantly white and cis people, right? Cis being not necessarily the opposite of trans, but it's a reference to a not being trans identity. So also, if I'm using terminology that you're not familiar with, feel free to put in the chat, and I can follow up with you in the chat after the talk. So we're trying to figure out how to have a space for folks who are queer, trans, and gender expansive to talk about their environmentalism and why they're coming to the climate movement. The biggest part for us is what are the connections, right? So there are many body autonomy movements around the world. Access to abortion is one of them, of course, and that's an intersecting gender role for cis and trans people, of course. But what is it about access to healthcare right now for trans people, right? The ability to advocate for yourself as a person, right? And your need to have, whether it's hormone replacement therapy, access to surgery, access to any other kinds of mental or physical health care for trans and queer people. And what is the connection between protecting the planet, right? If we consider the fact that, the colonial project that has really reduced land in the global South to what is a pile of potential resources for consumer goods, and what is the connection between that centuries-long project of reducing land and reducing people, right? So part of the story is that queer and trans identities and gender expansive identities have existed in pre-colonial times, but now they're being attacked as if it's some type of new identity. It's almost as if the erasure of trans and queer and gender expansive people is continuing as part of the colonial project. So why is protecting the environment so connected to the fight for body autonomy? And that's what I've seen in conversations with other trans and queer folks. And it's part of my impetus to be a part of not just the environmental movement, but multiple movement spaces. And so one of the biggest things, this goes back not just for queer and trans folks, but we know that when not just movement spaces, but jobs, society, government is inclusive of everybody that's participating, and you often don't have an option to participate in capitalism, but when we're participating in these spaces, how can our experiences as trans and queer people, oftentimes not just inclusion but exclusion, strengthen the environmental movement, right? Because right now the movement might be seen as fractured, it might be seen as weakened, right? There's movements that have been born out of resistance to, say, the Trump era that might have had their wings clipped with the resurgence of Bidenism. So how do we recreate and strengthen spaces, right? I'm going to get to this in a little bit about building a home. Movement spaces, work spaces, of course, too, and civil society spaces based off of the experiences of trans and queer people. And this is something that maybe some of y'all are familiar with, this idea of gender euphoria. So gender euphoria is a concept that has to do with mental health, right? Mental health and physical health. And that when you are euphoric in yourself and in your body, you're able to, not just, be happy, right? That's a big part of it. But reach your potential, right? So how is the preservation of air, land, and water, among many other like environmental and climate components, an extension of gender euphoria? For a long time, the environmental movement was seen as not just like predominantly dominated by big white organizations, but it was also seen as a capturing of land for primarily, white settlers. We go back to the creation of Yosemite. That was a white supremacist, as a national park, that was a white supremacist project, right? Ansel Adams, was taking his pristine pictures of perfect land. That was a white supremacist project that was designed to create a euphoric space primarily for white folks in California, of course. And he was doing this in conjunction with founder of the Sierra Club, blanking on his name, with John Muir, right? And in conjunction with needs for kind of what we call the modern national park movement started by Teddy Roosevelt. And that project of seizing land and creating safe spaces for folks to, primarily white folks, is one of a neocolonial exports that we have today, right? So the national park movement was exported across the world. And today it's been devastating for indigenous communities, and it's been devastating for folks who have traditionally accessed the land, for life, for leisure, to have their euphoria in themselves in connection with the land. And we're now reclaiming that, right? And so there's also there's race and class issues about what it means to access the land, right? You have to have hundreds of dollars worth of hiking gear to actually be a hiker. How do students in urban centers access parks when there's no busing systems? So what is an extension of preserving air and land, and not just for queer and trans people, but across a lot of intersecting identities for oppressed people, and creating a sense of gender and land euphoria? Cool. So that kind of leads me to why queer and green, right? Why focus on this idea of queer and green? So for folks who are familiar with the term queering, it's an older term. It comes from the idea that you're taking the sense of queerness, differentness, otherness, expressions of self to a space. And in this particular instance, the green movement, right? The environmental movement. And part of that has been because the home is coded, it's defined itself as inclusive, when a lot of us, especially across, racial and economic what do you call it, economic identities, know that it's not inclusive, right? Especially when we talk about, like I mentioned, the national park system, but also policy systems that are designed to exclude what we call frontline communities from policy discussions, because they're typically Black and brown communities, private immigrant communities, folks who maybe don't have an economic or political stake in the local and up to national political environment. And with trans and queer folks, we're seeing this too, because often, folks are coming into a space that's seen as inclusive and met with continuing oppressions, layered oppressions, and microaggressions is a big part of this. All right, so quick tips: if someone shares their pronouns with you, use them, right? That's just do it, right? That's the first thing you can do for and queer and trans people aren't just a reduction to their pronouns, but that's what we call a socialization of your identity. And it's important to affirm that for folks. And the consent is a big part of this, right? So if you're in a relationship or a movement space where folks are feeling comfortable to share, whether it's an expanded gender identity with you or an identity that doesn't match what is prescribed by their government, you have to make sure it's okay with that person to share their identity and their pronouns with others, right? This is called outing, right? You don't know at what point in someone's journey they are in their their gender journey, right? And you don't need to out folks to others. And this is also true for activists, right? Activists in movement spaces are along the whole gamut of political activism, from letter writing, maybe engaging with local elected officials, to direct action, stuff that's potentially can impact them in terms of the incarceration system. So when folks are bringing not just their activism but their different identities into a space, there's a huge potential for a lack of safety and lack of safety outside of that movement, right? So when folks, and I engage in direct action that can potentially have me end up in jail, a big component for me is which jail cell am I going to end up in? And like that's a huge concern for me, right? And none of them are good, but every city has different policies on how they're going to incarcerate and punish, right, gender and nonconforming people, or gender nonconforming people. And that's something that you don't want to replicate within your movement space, again, or work or civil society. And someone's identity may change over time, and that's super cool, right? So however someone identifies openly to you today may be different tomorrow, and it may be different the next day. The point of evolving a movement with the people who are in your space is that you welcome them and you accept them regardless of who they are. Here's a quick list. Okay, so you, me, and inclusion. Again, quick tips. Trans, and these are just some facts to help kind of break a lot of the barriers for folks, because what we see, or what I've experienced, is that a lot of trans, queer, and gender expansive people are kind of almost tiered in this like experience based off of age. And trans, queer, and gender expansive people aren't new. It's not a fad for young people. What we know about the LGBT community in general, not just queer and trans people, is that the percentage of the population has pretty much been the same percentage across time. What has happened, though, and this is a good thing, is that as society and cultural norms have shifted along with movement spaces, right? These are movement spaces that are often shifting culture and society, is that folks are feeling safer to be out, and that's part of it, being safer to be out. So the inclusion of people and the access to rights makes it seem that as if there are more, but they've just always been there, but perhaps in the closet, or what we call closeted. It's not a new thing, it's not a fad. So if someone tells you like, oh, I use they them pronouns, like, oh, this is a new thing, that actually might be more something about centering yourself in that person's experience, which we don't want to do, right? It's not about trying to absolve yourself of a mistake. It's just a mistake, right? So to include that person, if you make a mistake, don't center yourself, just move on, right? These are tips that will help trans and queer folks feel included. You often hear folks say, oh, in my, I'm older, so I don't know about this. And that actually might be that there's a couple reasons why that might be. One of them is, again, a less safe environment where more people were closeted. Two, there was the AIDS epidemic and crisis that hollowed out, killed an entire generation of queer people. And on top of that, there's the incarceration of queer and trans people and the homelessness crisis that queer and trans people experience at a higher rate. So folks who are queer and trans are often living on the fringes of society. And it's just more recent that we're included in more mainstream spaces. And the environmental movement in the activist space is still a fringe space to some degree. Again, so just to underscore, the seeming growth about gender expansive people is it's about safety, right? And so that's what we're trying to do when we build a home in the environmental movement for queer, trans, and gender expansive people. So again, what we're doing at Queer and Green, and this is a bit of our call to action, is we're providing safe spaces for queer, trans, and gender expansive activists. We have the resources for folks who are maybe feeling that their external impressions are creeping into their movement space, creeping into their workspace, to do training and facilitation for movement people, to be kind of just like text buddies with folks who need somebody to reach out to. Because, you know, folks who are maybe queer and trans in a movement space are not out in their workspace. So how do we help folks feel supported in every experience in their life? We do art shows, pop-ups, and galleries. A big part of our movement, right? I mentioned we're part of a project called Climate Creative. That is an art space. And so one of our biggest things that we do right now, we're planning an art gallery, pop-up shows for later this year. So if you know queer and trans artists who might like to be featured, please feel free to reach out. Again, training and facilitation on inclusion. And right now, we're answering the call for cross-movement resources. Right now, we're working on some zines, and I'll give a preview of one of those zines. The biggest thing that we found, especially as movement people, as artists, as queer and trans movement people, is the ability to produce art very quickly in a manner that can be distributed at marches, at rallies, at city council meetings, whatever, what have you, across social media, so that resources get out quickly and then get out organically with kind of the intention of what it means to be queer and trans, right? So we're not just queering, you know, the movement space, but we're queering the way resources are done, right? It doesn't have to be an official white paper that comes from a city council and it's stamped and it's in its official creed. We're exchanging our knowledge and our experience in a queer way, right? Getting folks the information they need quickly. And I'll go over one of our zines we're working on right now. So right now we're especially in answering the call to support solidarity for Palestinian people. We're working on a zine that is a parallel between pink and greenwashing. And what we have found is that pinkwashing, greenwashing work on this spectrum of motivational to demotivational washing, right? So how you're going to influence somebody either, you know, subversively or very overtly in order to motivate them or demotivate them to take an action or not take an action. With pink and greenwashing, the clearest motivational washing tactic is consumer goods. For folks who, you know, are aware of like, and you can't not be aware of capitalism, you'll notice around June, Pride Month every year, that there's rainbow merchandising, right? This is a clear pink washing tactic to engage people in technically a positive way to buy their goods, to wear their goods, and to represent their brand. We also see greenwashing in terms of consumer goods, in terms of EVs and carbon credits, right? So this idea that if you buy something, right, buying rainbow merchandise, buying EVs, buying carbon credits, regardless of what they actually mean for society and shifting away from some of our oppressions, that you are somehow better, right? That you are somehow engaging in your identity in a way that is better for society. Demotivational pink and greenwashing is it preys on assumptions and biases that a person or a group of people might have. These are often fear-based, and they depend on retaining the status quo. So when we talk about fear-based pinkwashing, what we're seeing right now is, you know, a lot of queer and trans folks are standing up and answering the call for solidarity with Palestine. And there's just this immediate attack that, oh, if you lived in Palestine, you would be attacked, you would be killed. That's 100% a hypothetical, and it erases the experiences of queer and trans people in Palestine, right? And a part of this is that folks who are being attacked in Palestine right now aren't being attacked for being queer and trans; they're being attacked for being Palestinian, right? So it reduces the larger picture to a fear-based identity to demotivate somebody in order to maintain the status quo. And we see this with fossil fuels too. So as we're trying to transition our technologies away and our jobs away from fossil fuel technologies, gas, oil, liquid natural gas, a lot of we see this in California legislature all the time, the fear-based tactics on gas prices, right? That's the go-to one. How do we maintain the status quo? We have to make people afraid for their wallet. And we have to make people afraid that, oh, my electricity bill is going to skyrocket. Oh, this is actually not that helpful of a technology. So demotivating folks in a way that can maintain the status quo is a big part of pink and greenwashing. And of course, this plays out in our politics. Identity politics, whether or not somebody is actively using their policies and platforms to further and better the lives of queer and trans people, politicians from Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump will say they're the best candidate for queer and trans people, regardless of their policies and platforms. And what we see in places like San Francisco now, politicians are using their gay identity to advocate for, again, some of these demotivational pinkwashing politics to destabilize movements. And I think the biggest thing I've found from this is that it's about eroding solidarity. So I will slowly wrap up here and just welcome you all to check out our website, queerandgreen.com. We're working on, again, these resources right now. We're having conversations with queer and trans activists on how to build more sustainable and inclusive movements. Because what I have found is that folks across oppressed identities, youth, queer, trans, Black and brown immigrant people are often front and center in movement spaces, chanting, doing a lot of the work, and they're getting burned out. So how can we support these folks? How can we make sure they're not getting burned out? And how can we make sure that they're represented in leadership and decision-making as well? So please check out our website. I'll put it in the chat. And thank you for the time today, for hearing about what it means to be queer and green.
Thank you so much, Nick. That was amazing. Really amazing. I learned so much. We really appreciate you being here. And I think next, Karis, are you gonna introduce again? Yeah. So go ahead, take it away. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Next up, we have Tatum Starr, who uses they, she pronouns and is a co-founder for Women with Bows and Land and Water Protector. Thank you so much.
Hi, can everybody hear me? All right, awesome. Hi, it is a pleasure to be with all of you guys here today. My name is Tatum, and I am from the Pomo Nation Kashaya Band. And today I'm gonna kind of be talking about what a two-spirit is and what roles that we play in the movement. So a two-spirit person is what I identify as. And this basically means that we walk in both worlds. We can relate to both genders, both the masculine and the feminine. Two spirits have always been around. And so when it comes to gender, we've always been in our communities very gender inclusive. Two spirit, the term was brought around during the 3rd annual Intertribal Gay and Lesbian Conference, where Elder Maya Laramie gave Two Spirit a name for us, like as an Indigenous community, because in a lot of these spaces, there hasn't always been a lot of room for Indigenous people and Indigenous identities, Indigenous voices. There hasn't always been that representation. So Two Spirit was given to us to give us a sense of community and something that we could be a part of, something that we could identify as. Now, pre-colonial times, Two Spirits played a very important role in many tribes across this land. There were Two Spirits that were female-bodied, Two Spirits that were male-bodied. And a lot of times they would often switch up their roles. So you would see the female-bodied Two Spirits would be healers, they would be protectors, they would be warriors. And the Two Spirits that were male-bodied would often take a lot of teaching roles, guiding the youth, making pottery, cooking, a lot of like cultural crafts. So they were also thought, I had an elder talk to me once when he was telling me what Two Spirit was, because I didn't always know. I didn't, I didn't really know what category I fell into. I didn't really feel like non-binary, but I didn't feel like I was either gender either. So on my reconnection journey, I went and I sat with my elders, and they have a very interesting way of telling you things. A lot of times they won't directly tell you, but they'll sit you down and they'll tell you a story. And he started telling me a story about, the two-spirit people, and that, the creator basically would put two children into one child. And so they were thought to be blessings from creators. And oftentimes we would take up roles as healers, as shamans. We were dreamers, visionaries. And, these things in our tribes, there was no such thing as patriarchy. There was no such thing as misogyny in the way that we see it today. There was, these things were celebrated. These things were held at a very, very high position in our tribes. And so we respected the two spirits. The two spirits, the third genders, the people who walked with the moon, the people, that were born from the stars. So it wasn't until the residential school era and the colonization here on this land that we really started embracing those views of misogyny, of patriarchy, of internalized homophobia. And, there was a very big reason for this. During the residential school history, there were residential schools, there were missions, there were boarding schools, and these places ripped away Native children from their families and forced them into these prison camps, basically. And I know some of us heard about that during, what was happening in Canada with all the bodies that were being discovered under the churches. That's basic information that a lot of people in the movement know now. But what a lot of people don't know is there were schools here too, all across the United States. And, what we had here in California were the girls and boys ranches and the missions. And when they took us to these places, they stripped us of our identity. They made us cut our hair. They made us wear dresses. They made us wear, clothing to fit our gender, which I never really understood that. They gave us specific roles. You're a girl. You're going to act like a girl. You're going to dress like a girl. This is how you be a good wife. And so you'll see a lot of times that we are actively trying to break this now, right? Because it's been so engraved in our ancestors' minds, that these are the way that things are supposed to be. And so now we see through healing and reconnection that we're starting to find our way back to these identities that have been erased from us for so long. A lot of us being afraid to be two-spirit, to be third gender, because of the way the residential schools treated our elders. So now you see this sort of disconnect, but I think it's also very, very beautiful that we are reconnecting through this climate fight. And through a lot of Indigenous movements, we are finding our way back to this identity that is so beautiful and so diverse and so intertribal and different for every tribe, Some tribes had the two-spirit, like Ojibwe. Some people had third gender. Some people even had up to 5 genders, 6 genders. And I think that is very beautiful. And I think that we have a lot to learn from Indigenous communities about embracing gender, because as the speaker before me said, we've always been here. This isn't new. It's not a fad. It's just it's becoming a safer and more welcoming space for us to finally find our roots again. And it is so important now that, you know, we're seeing a lot more Indigenous representation, a lot of more Indigenous people in these spaces. And so we're finding our way back to that. And I think that that is very, very beautiful. Now, what roles do we as two spirits play in modern times and in this climate fight? So for me, I feel as an Indigenous person, but also as a two spirit, I have this natural connection and natural urge to go wherever there's a cry for help. Because these things are an extension of ourself. When our earth is being attacked, when our waters are being poisoned, when our trees are being logged and cut down, we feel these things as an extension of ourselves. We are the limb of the tree. We are these waterways, and we feel that deep within us. And so we instantly have this nurturing nature that wants to go and heal these spaces. And we saw that there's a lot of two spirit camps. You know, we kind of went over this on the last speak as well, but the movement offers a safe space for LGBTQ and two spirit individuals. It's a space that we can go where we're surrounded by other people that are able to embrace us. And we saw that at a two spirit camp at line 3. There's been two spirit camps at line 5. There was two spirit camps at Standing Rock. So we're everywhere. We have our hands in every aspect of this movement because we are natural protectors and healers of the land. And we have a duty, a sacred duty, to stand up for our people and be there for our people when that cry for help comes. And when I say our people, I don't just mean mine, Pomo, Kashaya. I don't just mean mine, Indigenous. I mean mine as in you. I mean every single person. I feel like I have that duty to stand up and to be there and to walk in all areas of the movement, because what we're seeing right now in the world is a humanity crisis. We're seeing, we're just seeing so many humanity crises. I mean, especially like right now in Palestine, me as an individual, what can I do except protest and make my voice heard and pray over the people who are out there putting their bodies on the line. Another thing that I also think is really amazing is that we kind of naturally fall into our traditional roles as well when we're in the movement. A lot of times you see the women-bodied two spirits. We're out there going head to head with cops as warriors would. We're out there taking up spaces in these courtrooms. We're strategizing. We're, you know, making action plans. We're going in and we're healing. So we're taking up those roles. And, you know, the male bodies, what I've seen a lot on the front lines as well, is they do a lot of the arts that we need for these major events. They do a lot of the teaching of the youth, a lot of embracing the younger ones and guiding them through. So that's just one thing I've noticed. It's not always the case because obviously everybody goes out there and does it, but I've definitely noticed within the Indigenous movements that I've been in that the two spirits are finding their place in it. And we all work together as a unit body to get these things done. Another thing that I kind of wanted to talk about is something that, you know, some of us know about MMIW and Two Spirits. So our missing and murdered Indigenous women and Two Spirits. This is a gender-based violence is a very, very big thing in our communities. And we see it constantly. You know, we're out in the world, whether we're protesting or whether we're at home, it seems to find us. And especially out on the front lines, you know, you can go out there and you can be shouting for the top of your lungs, like, just find our girls, find our two spirits, find our family members. And a lot of times we are met with brutality. A lot of times we are sprayed down. I've been to protests just for MMIW to bring awareness to these things. And I've seen people completely destroy our signs, and the things that we hang up, they just take them right down. And something that really hurts my soul is when other people go missing here, you don't have to protest for them. When other races go missing, there's not these big actions to protest because nobody's hearing you. These things, they make it to the news. They're talked about. You know, we've seen entire search parties happen for people who are non-Indigenous. But when it comes to Indigenous people, a lot of times these outdated policies on sovereignty and jurisdiction make it nearly impossible for us to get help. A lot of times as the United States sees it, it's like, oh, well, you want to be sovereign, you want to keep your land? Okay, well, we're not going to help you in any way, so don't ask us to come help. When in reality, we should be able to ask for that help, just as other jurisdictions can ask other jurisdictions to ask for, like, to help, you know? So I want to go over kind of some of these statistics just to kind of put it in perspective, that 97% of violence against Indigenous women is committed by non-Indigenous men on tribal lands. But once those people leave our tribal lands, there's no way to prosecute them. It's a jurisdiction issue at that point. So the perpetrators of this violence are rarely ever prosecuted. The murder rate of Indigenous women is 10 times higher than the national average, and and the third leading cause of our death is murder. Unfortunately, gender-based violence, including sexual assault and domestic violence, physical violence, is committed against 78 to 85% of Indigenous Two-Spirits. Back in 2016, there was 5,712 reports made for MMIW and missing Two-Spirits. Only 116 of those cases were ever logged into the database. We see in 2020 another staggering number at 5,295. So just to give a rough estimate of how many of us are going missing every year, how many names do you know of people who've gone missing from the Indigenous community? How many have you heard make it to mainstream media? How many do you see come across your page every day? Because for me, I'm following all the MMIW pages and I see at least 5 new ones every day. And the majority of these women, girls, and Two-Spirits that are going missing are under the age of 17. Very, very, very young. Another reason why these things are going on at such the rate that they're going on at is because on a lot of our reservations, they distance things a lot, forcing people to have to walk to where they need to get. And if you live in an area where you're coming from poverty and you don't have a car and you don't really have the means to get places, and you're young, you might say yes to somebody who's coming down the street. Do you want to ride? Yeah, I do. So I'm doing as much as I can within my community to educate the youth about these things and give them those numbers and statistics. When I'm out helping in other communities, I help people who I see walking, because I don't want that to happen to them. When these bodies are recovered, and we do find these Native women, which is a very rare occurrence, 135% of those bodies are more than likely to be unidentified by the time they find them. 4 in 5 Indigenous women will experience violence or have already. I have. The root causes of these things stem from trauma, from colonization, from these fights as well. One thing that not a lot of people know that ties everything together with the climate and our fight in the climate justice movement is when they bring pipelines through, they often put these pipelines right next to Indigenous land. And I wanna ask why. Why would they do that? There's surely other places that they could be putting these, right? No, it's a war tactic still on our people to put these things directly next to our rivers and streams so that we don't have access to clean drinking water. Right now, the Dene Nation does not have clean drinking water. When these pipelines are brought next to our land, they bring something called man camps. And man camps are set up with, all of the men who work on these pipelines. This brings a lot of trouble to our communities because now we have men right next to where our girls are walking through. Man camps like on Line 3 in Bridge, they were caught up in a sex trafficking ring 3 times on that pipeline. And so with man camps brings trouble, and you will see our numbers of missing and murdered Indigenous Two-Spirits spike when that happens. Because a lot of people, I don't know how else to put it except that a lot of people are in need. And a lot of people don't always understand the risk of these men. They come in and maybe they're charming, maybe they're like, hey, I can give you what you want. I can take you out somewhere nice, And so what we can do is just keep an eye out for our girls, keep an eye out for our Two-Spirits, because these things are heavy in our communities. And I cannot stress enough what it feels like to be Two-Spirit, but also female-bodied. I feel as if I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, even in movement spaces, because you just never know. You never know who's working for opposite sides. I can't go anywhere alone. I have a very productive mother. She's done her job in keeping me alive this long. But, I have a tracker on my phone when I go out. I don't really go anywhere alone. I'm either with a friend or I'm with my family because of these things that happen in our communities, and it kind of gives you a sense of not having all the freedom that you should. And so that's kind of driven my fight to fight even harder to bring awareness to these subjects, because I don't like feeling like that. And I know for sure that a lot of our community doesn't like having to have this dark statistic behind you and this fear of becoming a statistic. It's really, really, really sad. It's really sad to see. And so what can we do to prevent these things from happening? Well, my advice would be share every post that you see, make videos about it, You know, a lot of people are really scared to do that because they're like, oh, well, if I post too much of this, you know, maybe I'm going to lose my friends over it. Or like, why are you always posting these sad things? Well, it's a sad reality. So we have to post about these things. We have to talk about these things. We have to make these changes so that we can all be equal at the table. So when, yeah, talking about gender and stuff, it rains really heavy on me because these are things that should just be accepted. And it's really sad that they're not. So I'm gonna do my, I'm gonna wrap up here and say thank you for listening, and thank you for holding space here for me to talk about these things today.
Oh my goodness, that was just, you brought tears to my eyes, Tatum. That was beautiful. And thank you for sharing all that. That was, I learned a lot. I'm so far this morning, I'm just taking notes, learning so much. And we've never met before, but hopefully we'll be meeting again. So,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
yes, thank you. I
you.
think Janelle is going to introduce the next speakers. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tatum. That was really insightful. I learned a lot from your words. Up next, we have Ethos de Leon, who uses they, them pronouns. They are a social justice activist and an elected board of directors and also a licensed EMT. All right, Ethos, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ethos, they, them pronouns. I'm coming from the Milwaukee land in Sacramento. And I first just want to take some time to thank my ancestors and my guides for bringing me on the journey to be able to speak on what I'm about to share with you today. And also want to thank my friend Zai, my sibling, for giving me this opportunity to be here with you all today. So I will admit, this is the first time I'm doing this on my phone. I'm also working on becoming a licensed paramedic right now. So I have a paramedic internship interview. So I'm in my car. So the thing that I want to talk to you all today is about colonization, white supremacy, and its effects on climate and gender. Because Angela Davis said in her Freedom, in one of her books that she talks about Palestine, is that it's really important for us to have a global context in all of our movements and all the things that we're doing, because it's important to have the masses in the global majority mobilizing in a mass way. So we have to make things relatable. We have to make things intersectional. Forgive me, I'm going to use my notes so you won't see my video any longer. But root versus prescriptive diagnosis, I really talk about this because I'm not sure if y'all have heard about the book called Inflamed Deep Medicine and The Anatomy of Injustice by Rupa Myra and Raj Patel. And this book is absolutely revolutionary because what it does, it compares our body systems, our organ systems with the earth ecosystems. And it also shows how colonization has shifted our ecosystems, which has affected our body systems, particularly. She speaks about the salmon nation of the Pacific Northwest and how colonizers, when they came to the Americas, they had a high demand, a capitalistic demand for beaver pelt back in Europe. And essentially they decimated their beaver population out in Europe. So when they came to the Americas and saw how densely populated the beaver population was, they extinct the beaver population in a few years, which essentially affected our riverways, which then affected the salmon population, which then affected the Native American population of the salmon nation in the Pacific Northwest, which also affected their overall health, causing diabetes, causing cardiovascular disease, and all sorts of other diseases. So it's really important. The point that I'm making here is that all of this is interlinked from the beginning of colonization to all the way right now. And colonization has not ended. It is continuing. And it is so obvious that it is continuing that I think for the first time in a really long time, this is the most people I've ever heard talk about settler colonialism, decolonization, because of Palestine. Palestine is awakening us right now. So something that I ask is, how can we as a collective of humanity determine what is good for one another, for an entire culture, for entire species, an entire planet. We are often forced with prescriptivism of how we should act, prevent, and treat ailments, politics, geopolitics, and the way we approach the world. This prescriptivism is clouded with hazy dualities and otherings of the other, which is just dehumanization, which is just oppression of one another. And where did this prescriptivism come from? Who is determining how we make the choices we make and the way we perceive the world? And then I always ask this as an existentialist, what is self? Is there such thing as individuality in a world that is so interdependent upon each other for its mere survival, let alone its thrivation? And so for me pursuing emergency medicine, I'm actually not affiliated with any organization, not affiliated with any nonprofit, because in these nonprofit industrial complex systems that were supposedly here for healing and liberation and for our freedom and for social justice, the recapitulation of colonized white supremacy within the nonprofit industrial complex became incredibly detrimental on my mental health. In Western world, we call what I suffer through, it's called complex PTSD, meaning that the trauma and the oppression and the discrimination that I face as a trans, non-binary, brown human being is nonstop. Every time I step outside my door, there's always a risk that I could be targeted, that I could be murdered, and that one day I just won't be here because of the way that I am and the way that I express myself. So then we can see how our politics and medicine, the way that we speak of the ailments and problems of the world is through the lens of white saviorism, meaning that those who are a part of a death cult of colonized white supremacy believe that as the ultimate and superior version of human being, this cosmology believe that they know what is best for humanity. When a culture believes that they are the sole savior of everyone else, there's a tendency to neglect the root causes of problems and disease because a full exploration of what's going on would require for them to acknowledge and see their own violence that is contributing to these problems. Western cultures have a serious misdiagnosis issue across multiple realms and thought of and culture. Western cultures avoid proper diagnosis to get to the root of the disease and political issues, because if they did, they would have to once again acknowledge that oppression, racism, transphobia, and other forms of discrimination and oppression lead to major ailments, disease, and political violence, and also the destruction of our earth. Western culture, also what I call colonized white supremacy, would have to admit that this culture is the root cause of all disease and political violence. Rupa Myra writes, and Inflamed, quote, the root of a diagnosis is the knowledge of antecedent parts, and that makes sense of the present in order to change the future. Without taking into account the myriad ways systemic injustice impacts the body, the standard medical narrative connecting the past, present, and future falls short, lacking the explanatory power to address and change the course of illness, end quote. A diagnosis that fails to incorporate this history is one that has no part in healing. This is a stark difference between root diagnosis and prescriptive diagnosis. Root diagnosis takes into account the effects that oppression, trauma, and stress and external factors has on the body and all of its systems. Prescriptive diagnosis doesn't always require a full investigation into what the root cause of the ailment. And we can see this across Western medicine, across Western psychology, even in emergency medicine. A lot of the times in what we do in Western culture, we just try to band-aid it, or we try to shift the consciousness without actually changing the systems and structures that are causing the ailments in the first place. We're never getting to the root of the source. And this is something that I've learned from my sis and other all my other siblings from other indigenous nations across the First Nations, from the Piscataway to the Northern Arapaho to the Shoshone, is like, we must get to the root. In order to dig out this root and replant something new, we must compost the empire. But we cannot do that if we leave any kind of root in our garden as a collective, as a global majority. Prescriptive diagnosis is also abusive, and it has narcissistic tactics of DARVO, which is DARVO is defense, attack, reverse victim. And I forget the O, I apologize. Someone remembers it, throw it in the chat. And you'll see this actually with Israeli propaganda. DARVO is happening 24/7 when Hamas is always the one being blamed. That is called DARVO. And this tactic makes the patient or the individual the sole responsibility for their health, or polarized political violence, instead of looking systemically and globally and culturally for a root diagnosis. So then Myra goes on to write, quote, today's medical and social sciences have had a hard time navigating the connections between our health, our histories, and our societies. Wow, sorry, that was a typo, but even this disconnect speaks to a deeper problem woven into the origins of modern medicine. Most doctors, humans really, have unwittingly inherited a colonial worldview that emphasizes individual health, disconnecting illnesses from its social and historical contexts and obscuring our place in the web of life that makes us who we are, end quote. Sorry. And she goes on to say, quote, we carry this theory of diagnosis to a step further, locating the causal origin of disease in the multidimensional spaces around us and beyond the individual body, in histories, ecologies, narratives, and dynamics of power. The inflammatory disease we are seeing today is not the cause of bodies' dysfunctional reactions. They are our body's correct response to a pathological world, end quote. So the empire will never give us the full story of diagnosis, especially in regard to war and genocide. They will give you a surface level diagnosis to justify their violent colonization tendencies. This includes the Western medical industry. It is up to the people to co-discover and co-investigate the root diagnosis of problems of the world and our bodies and health. We have to advocate for our histories to be told in truth, that everything we are witnessing is a reaction to the pathological world that is dominated by a cosmology that forces violence, oppression, and division upon us, which inevitably creates disease and inflammation in our body. And as a paramedic, as someone who is aspiring to become a paramedic, this is so crucial for someone like me in the back of my ambulance, one being a trans non-binary person who visibly wears my they/them rainbow badge to ensure and signal safety to any LGBTQ patients that I may get in the back. And not only that, it is also crucial for me to understand the human that is before me as a patient. I chose to step away from the nonprofit world because we were talking so much and not doing anything. We have all this money and we had so much money, we had so many grants, we had so much funding, but then all we were doing was sitting around a table and talking, and I got tired of it. So I left my career in the nonprofit industry and I started pursuing emergency medicine, because if I can have this perspective as a trans non-binary human being who has been masculine presenting since I was about 2 years old, I know I've been gay since I had a consciousness and could understand attraction at a young age. My first crush was the Pink Power Ranger. Like, it was that young that I knew who I was. And if I could be that visual representation in the back of an ambulance in a world where medicine is so violent towards the global majority, then I believe that one by one that we can change things, but it is also hard to change things within a system. And this is why I exist outside of the nonprofit industrial system. And I tend to consult also, but it's so important for us to also talk about the basics of what white supremacy is. And I personally come from a somatic background, and understanding white supremacy, which means it's a full body perspective. Like, where do you feel this in your body? What does it look like? What does it taste like? What is the shape of it? And this is like, if you all have heard of Resma Minicum, he has a book called My Grandmother's Hands that really gets into this. And the way that all this ties into climate and gender is actually really special because I heard previous speakers talking about sustainable movements. But what does that look like? I was out in Washington, D.C. during the Trump administration, and the amount of self-sacrifice and martyrdom and exhaustion and burnout that was happening in our movements was obscene. We cannot be sustainable if we do not actually take care of ourselves, if we do not metabolize our trauma, if we do not decide that this is where ancestral and intergenerational and historical trauma ends with us. And I think understanding white supremacy from this viewpoint is actually really revolutionary. So I have a presentation that, once again, I can't share because it's very complicated on the phone. So it's called So What is White Supremacy Anyways? And I also have these as threads on my Instagram in addition. So to preface this, I just want to say, when I speak of white supremacy and whiteness, it's referring to a cosmology, a cultural normative, and a system, not as individuals. We tend to take things very personally as individuals because of hyper-individualism, neoliberalism, but I'm talking about a whole system that impacts us all, because white supremacy is a cosmology that determines a supreme standard that's set forth to create a superiority complex based on whiteness of one's skins, deeming whiteness superior to other skin colors. So Resma Medicum says the cultural operating system of white body supremacy influences or determines many of the decisions we make, the options we select, the choices open to us, and how we make those decisions and choices. This operating system affects us all, regardless of the hue of your skin, regardless of your gender, regardless of where you come from. Colonized white supremacy is in everything. It's in the water that we drink. It's in the food that we eat. It's in the things that we buy. It's in the things that we watch. We have to be actively dismantling it, somatically abolishing colonized white supremacy from our bodies on a daily basis. And I think one of the most important points here, I only have a few minutes left, that I really want to make here is that a lot of Black scholars, a lot of Indigenous scholars, a lot of thought leaders and spiritual BIPOC and queer leaders believe that white supremacy is a complete disembodiment effect on the body. Rev. Angel Kyoto Williams asked, how could the white body person watch as black and brown bodies were being sold on the market and measured into slavery in the middle of the market and not react? How can folks watch the genocide of Palestine and not feel a single thing, and also even justify the genocide and the apartheid and the occupation that has literally dismembered and disabled the Palestinian people on a mass scale that we have never seen before, even during the Holocaust? The statistics is beyond the Holocaust if this was to continue in the duration. So how can we watch living day trauma and feel absolutely nothing? And this goes into the idea of trauma porn. Because living in a capitalist world demands that we work to pay to live, which means that we have low wages, high cost of living. We're often exhausted, and when we're exhausted, it's inevitable for injustice to be expressed through our own selves. And not only that, when we're exhausted, our bodies are naturally inflamed. When we're experiencing oppression, as I mentioned before, our bodies are naturally inflamed. So when COVID comes around, who are the most vulnerable? In this case, the global majority, because our bodies are constantly inflamed, constantly producing cortisol, constantly producing all these inflammatory sympathetic nervous system responses, because the world that we live in is not safe for us. The world that we live in, the cosmology that we live in, is constantly telling us, whether it's covert or overt, that it wants us dead. So then Dr. Keisha Fikes explains that oppression forces us into a posture that's not our own, whether we are on the giving or receiving end of white supremacy, meaning we express injustices, trauma, and harm that have been passed down intergenerationally through culture, trauma, and even our DNA. So I think the most important thing that I really want to conclude here with, because I want to leave some time moving forward, is that one, it's up to us to really somatically abolish colonized white supremacy and to rest and to take care of ourselves, even though it is such a privilege to do so, because in Palestine, they're not able to rest, they're not able to take a break. But here in the United States, we get the privilege to ask ourselves, how do we create sustainable movements? How do we make sure that we're filling the role and not overfilling our role, where we're self-sacrificing ourselves? And not only that, when harm is inevitably expressed through our bodies, how do we take ownership? How do we acknowledge it? How do we feel remorseful? And how do we take action steps to reduce the harm and do better next time? These are all things that I've learned from my sis in the Northern Arapaho, my other sis in the Piscataway. This is stuff that I learned from the Shipibo down in the Sacred Peru, is that we have such an abundant opportunity to lean into community care and create community systems of care, which I think a lot of leftist movements are missing, is that we're reactionary. We're reacting to things instead of, okay, what if we establish really strong systems of community care, make sure that our community feels safe taking action if, like, they want to shut down the bridge, if they want to do more direct action? How do we ensure that if they get in jail, that their animals, their children, their bills, all these things are taken care of, and that it's just an automatic system? Because colonized white supremacy has essentially a mastery of systems in a way that is so oppressive and bureaucratic that nothing gets done. But there is a mastery of systems. As I was a veteran and I see it in emergency medicine, there's a reason why there are certain protocols. But how do we get so creative that it isn't oppressive, and that we center decolonize white supremacy? Decolonize anti-oppression. So therefore, one, our cosmology allows for us to protect the earth around us. We always look at indigenous folks and the way that they protect the earth. They're stewards. They belong to the earth. They do not own it. That is their cosmology. So the way that the Palestinian people have treated centuries old of olive trees, that's the cosmology that I believe that we all want in our world, and for our children and 7 generations after. And I want to thank you all for your time and for listening. And yeah, thank you so much. All my relations.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Ethos. It's the first time meeting you. That was incredibly important and amazing. And I really, really, really appreciate that Zai introduced you and Tatum to me. So thank you so much for being here. And next, Janelle's going to introduce again. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your words. I learned so much and it was super empowering. Up next, we have LZ Love, who is an artist, singer, songwriter, actress, author, and producer. Super excited to hear what you have to share with us this morning.
Hi, my name is LZ Love. I'm a singer, songwriter, activist, producer, and now I'm a writer. I wrote my first novel last year, and I'll share a little bit more about that. My pronoun is her and she. As I mentioned, I am a Black trans woman. And I would like to speak as a revolutionary, as an activist, as a person that has fought and pretty much stood up for it started as the gay community before it was the LGBTQ community. Believe it or not, I know my skin looks good. You can't tell because of my moisturizer, but I'll be 66 in April of this year. So I've been protesting for probably over 50 years. My first experience was when I was going to Willard Junior High School, and the anti-war movement was taking place on Telegraph Avenue. And it would also disperse through Telegraph to my school, where we had to all leave and go home. But of course, me and two of my curious friends, we decided not to go home. We decided to join the protests. That's where I started to be an activist. I got tear gassed. I threw rocks at the police cars. I did all that stuff because I felt it was important to end that anti-war movement. I went on to increase my active work as a activist, as someone that was empowered in my own way to make a stand. I stood at Zellebach and Sproul Plaza to free apartheid. That's when things were really horrible in South Africa, which it still is not that much better, but it's better today. Since then, I have been fighting for LGBTQ rights, LIA rights. I had the pleasure of marching with Harvey Milk. I was no more than 16 years old, but I was still active, realizing that I needed to stand up for what I believed in. We would march from the Castro to City Hall. I went on to sing background for a famous disco diva, Sylvester. That's where I got my first break as a singer. I learned a lot about gay politics, and it was more gay and lesbian at the time. It didn't evolve until the LGBTQ. It started maybe years later. But I really saw the fight that we all had to stand up for ourselves and about what we believe in and what we are that we can't run from, that we can't hide from, because you could try to go through the stages of sort of disguising yourself or trying to please your mom or your dad or your friends or your schoolmates or all that. And at the end of the day, you're the one that feels like you're cheating yourself. You're the one that feels as though that you're not being true and you're not transparent to yourself. So those are the reasons why I had the strength to really feel as though that my true identity was transgender. And this is my last stage of transitioning. I'm grateful for all the non-binary that we have now, and we have others, as what the sister was speaking about, the different ways how the Native Americans look at people's gender. And she said there's 5 others, and there's many more to come, I'm sure. And we as human beings, we need to be identified by who we want to present ourselves to be. And it might be sort of strange to others, but it's true to you. And that is what counts. I like to speak on a level that we haven't really spoke on. I want to talk about the Black mother in the Black community. I was fortunate to have an amazing mother who supported me and who walked me in my transgender world, uh, gave me the incentive, the pride, the recognition, the okay, the love, the unconditional love to be me. And she knew that I always had that quality or that personality, but she was waiting for me to tell her, Mom, I think I'm ready to live full time as a transgender. And when I did have the courage to talk to her about that, me and her was living together at the time. She walked me in her room and she pointed to me her jewelry, her perfume, her nail polish, her clothing in her closet. She said, everything in this room you are welcome to. And that gave me the strength to be who I am today. Many of our people that's in the transgender, I'll say the LGBTQ community, LIA, are being denied by their family, let alone their mother or their father, their friends, their neighbors, who are discriminating against them because they're simply trying to just live their true identity. If you can help somebody, if you can encourage someone to love your child unconditionally, to love your sister unconditionally, to love your brother unconditionally, you will be helping to change the world. Because many of us in the LGBTQ community have decided to end their lives because of needing the approval of their family or their loved ones or their friends that they never received. And they decided to say, I don't feel as though that I can continue on this planet. Well, I'm here to tell you, as I put my fist in the air, I don't have to live that life because I was blessed to have the support from my mother. I got some support from my family members. I got the support from some of my friends that didn't change on me when I told them that I was going to change my identity and really live who I am. Even in the music community, many people in that community have embraced me, and I have achieved many great things. I'm the first Black transgender to receive a proclamation in Austin, Texas, when I lived there. I'm the first transgender to receive the cover story on the Austin Chronicle paper, my picture, my story about how I transitioned. Recently, since I've been living in Los Angeles, I just received some awards. This is one of them from the Unique Women's Coalition. And I received this during, it was called Tranny Giving, towards Thanksgiving. Towards Thanksgiving. Also, I received award from the mayor with West Hollywood. This is my book I was telling everyone about. I don't know if you can see it on here, but it's called From the Ruta to the Tuda.
It's kind of blurry.
It's still blurry, yeah. Okay, we'll put some notes up later, but it's called From the Ruta, and that's Ruta, Rooter, to Tothe, Tuda, Tooter. You can find it on Amazon. It speaks about my transitioning from a kid up until now, all the different experiences that I've had working with people such as Sylvester, Jennifer Lopez, Gene Simmons from KISS, Michael Franti and Spearhead, the Hawkins family, Oh Happy Day, just to name a few. You will hear my experiences of what I have encountered and how it has affected my life and have it enhanced my life. So I'm connecting with the Unique Women's Coalition here in Los Angeles, which really supports a lot of Black and Brown, young and older people in the LGBT community, mainly trans community. It's have houses, it's been creating housing for many of the girls and the guys that are homeless, helping them with health care, helping with clothing, helping to help them to be able to exist in society with education and training. Also, the Trans Latin Coalition. I've been working with them, and I have did benefits for them, and I've donated clothing, and that person is one of the executive producers of my book. So I just want to encourage everybody, in spite of the doors that might close in your face, because you're simply being who you are, being trans, being transgender, being gay, being lesbian, being bisexual, being non-binary, being LIA, whatever your gender might be, and to women, you know, the struggle you go through is similar to what we go through in the LGBT community, as being discriminated, as being murdered, sometimes by your own lovers. So, you know, we all have to work together. We all need to understand that we're not that big of a difference from one another. We are all human beings, but we're all trying to demonstrate our life and really present who we are. And sometimes it goes to a negative place with other people, which is unfortunate. But hopefully we can continue to fight the power and the powers to be that will prevent us from being who we are and prevent us from loving the way we need to love. So I'm going to just end with that. And I just want to share something with you guys. I want to leave something with you. And it says, this is my empowerment, my ability to create the life of my highest imagining thought that powers of my thoughts and actions. I drop the weight of limiting beliefs that have held me back in the past. I may have held myself. I don't excuse me. I may have told myself, excuse me for that. I might have told myself that I didn't deserve the life I wanted, that I couldn't do the things I wanted most to do. Now I tell myself a different story. I am deserving, I am capable, and I am empowered to accomplish all I set out to do. So I just want to leave that with you guys, to be encouraged about who you are. I don't care if somebody look at you crazy. I don't care if your mama or your daddy tell you to get out. Go to the communities to help you. They will help you house. They would help you to find housing. The communities will help you to get clothing. They will help you to get in programs to help empower you in your whatever your direction that you choose to go as a career. So just know, where there's a will, there's always a way. But mainly, don't you ever, never give up on yourself. Thank you, Cheryl, for having me here. I want to say it's been a blessing to learn a lot about climate, and also about global warming and climate change. I have to give some credit to our Vice President, Al Gore. Years ago, when I was a teenager, I thought this man was crazy talking about our planet talking about the reservoir, talking about climate change. And now today, as an adult, I see how this has affected us as a people, how it has affected our water, how it has affected our food. And don't think it hasn't affected your animals. It has affected your animals as well, let alone as us as human beings. So stay strong, everybody, and don't you let nothing turn you around. Peace and love. And you can go on YouTube. I am on YouTube, LZ Love. You can go on Instagram, ELZY Love, and I'm also on Facebook, a letter L, letter Z, separate word, love. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, LZ. I've known LZ from, I don't know, back in the 80s, I guess that
Yeah,
was.
early
So
80s.
it's wonderful to see you, and thank you for being here. And thank you for your beautiful words. All right, so next we're going to have Natalie introduce our next guest. Thank you, Natalie, our another fellow.
Thank you so much for your insight, Elsie. I'm so appreciative of the time you spent with us today. I'm so excited to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Amy Padula.
I'm just sharing my slides here to get started. I also wanted to say thank you to all the presenters that I've heard all morning long. They've been really inspiring and insightful and really moving talks, so thank you. So I'm gonna give a slightly different talk. So I'm a professor of obstetrics, gynecology, and reproductive sciences, but I'm trained as an epidemiologist, so I study kind of environmental exposures and how they affect our health. And climate is one that I'm particularly, climate-related exposures are one that I'm particularly interested in. And of course, they're becoming more severe and increasing currently. So just to give a little bit of background, so wildfires are one of the things that we study, and they're becoming larger and more intense, more destructive and more deadly. And California forests that are overcrowded, and although they're adapted to burn at regular intervals, they're not adapted at this intensity to burn like this. And as with climate change, as the temperatures are getting higher, it's also changing our wind patterns, and lightning events are happening more often, and we're also having prolonged droughts, as we're all aware of here in California and really the Western United States. Also, as more people are moving to California, more people are also living at the wildland urban interface, or also called WUI. And this is kind of the area kind of on the border sort of between wildlife and sort of where humans generally habitate. And so and also with kind of gentrification of kind of coastal cities, more people are moving inland and becoming exposed to more smoke. And for those of us in California, I know most of us have experienced way more wildfires in the recent years, and this just kind of shows how it's changed, over the last 100 years, how more of these really intense fires have been more recent. And so I'm interested in studying pregnant people, being part of the obstetrics and gynecology department at UCSF. And when people are pregnant, there are changes that occur in the sort of biology that make wildfire smoke and air pollution in general worse off. So people are inhaling more air per minute, and also the kind of whole cardiac system is working more intensely as carrying a child. And so this makes pregnant people more susceptible to pollutants. and so this is one of the reasons that we're concerned about pregnant people, especially with these increases in wildfires. We've also done a lot of work in kind of in other air pollution exposures, mostly traffic related, but the kind of intensity of these exposures kind of pale in comparison to wildfires. So we used data from all of the births in California over a decade to look at wildfire exposures in relation to preterm birth. So preterm birth is when babies are born too soon. Usually babies are born kind of around 40 weeks, but anything kind of below 37 weeks is considered preterm birth. And this also can be associated when children are born preterm, they're more likely to have more developmental delays, maybe problems with their lungs, since those are the last things to develop. And the earlier children are born, it's more also they're more likely to suffer in childhood and throughout adulthood. And so we use data from, I won't go into the sort of details of where the data come from, but basically there are kind of EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has a lot of data available and to pull information about what people are exposed to. So these are some maps using the threshold that the World Health Organization has set. It's what's considered hazardous to health. And on the left side, the kind of most colorful map of California shows kind of the total air pollution in terms of these fine particles. This PM 2.5 is just stands for particulate matter that's less than 2.5 microns. But these are just kind of little particles in the air when you see smoke that can that can be inhaled and can really get deep into your body, get into your bloodstream, and these are known to be hazardous to everyone's health. But you can really see the areas that are impacted mostly, and then really this kind of Central Valley and also these big city centers. So in the middle is a focus on the kind of traffic related pollution, or sort of the non-fire pollution. And then on the very right, the kind of blue map of California shows where the wildfire smoke has been, at least between 2007 and 2018. So it is dispersing even across especially in 2020 and 21, really even further across the state. But this is really concentrated up north in California, and also a fair bit inland. And this shows these graphs show the changes in the amounts of air pollution kind of over time, so kind of through the years. Again, sorry, these aren't labeled really very well, but kind of on the left, again, is the overall. In the middle is the traffic related pollutant, which also looks very similar because that's really kind of dominates it. And then on the right is the wildfires. And this is also split, kind of divided up by race, ethnicity, because we're always interested in understanding kind of who is being exposed to these pollution and kind of who is the most, what can we do to sort of change policies to protect people who are most exposed, to be able to reduce kind of health disparities and really kind of focus efforts for people most exposed. So African Americans are more highly exposed in California to traffic related pollution, kind of owing to environmental justice issues and kind of sources of that were, and also unfair practices, everything, going back to redlining and there's kind of a whole history of why that has occurred and continues to occur. And then with wildfire smoke, Native American and Native Indians are more exposed and are living in many cases in Northern California in that kind of blue map, and being exposed to higher levels of wildfire smoke. So this is a big concern to us. This shows a map of kind of a satellite image of what the smoke looks like, how much stemming. This was the Camp Fire from 2018, and just to see how it spreads across such a huge state, it's kind of phenomenal. And then how it looks and how sort of people estimate kind of how much people are exposed to, kind of based on the density of the smoke from satellite images. So this is, I'll kind of go through this quickly, but basically these are just sort of the numbers behind some of the work that we do to look at the association between wildfire smoke and preterm birth. And basically, with these these numbers are odds ratios, and it just shows that the odds of being born preterm when you're exposed to higher levels of wildfire smoke, it showed that it's an increase because it's above 1. It's an increase in odds that you'd be born preterm birth when you're exposed over your entire pregnancy or even across each trimester. And so this study included almost 5 million births. So this really takes advantage of the large population in California. And we were also concerned to see if there were certain weeks of pregnancy that may be more important than others, if there's kind of a critical period to when it may be worse to, that we should take kind of more protections to stay indoors or have more filters or things like that. And really kind of every kind of week of pregnancy, each one of these lines and dots is a week of pregnancy with all the data included, and really kind of any week is bad. We didn't really find a clear pattern as we were looking for to see if there was a particular time, but certainly towards the end of pregnancy, when there were higher exposures, we did have some more preterm births. So as I mentioned kind of briefly, so we're interested in understanding how these exposures are distributed in the population, and how they contribute to health problems, and specifically health inequities as well. So we're focusing on this idea of this kind of double jeopardy of being exposed to pollution and at the same time poverty, racism, inequality, and to determine if these kind of in combination contribute to some of the disparities we see in preterm birth, because preterm births are much more common in Black people, and outside of racism, it's hard to understand why, and all the things that come with that, why this is happening and what we can do to change this. And then additionally, now when you throw the wildfires on top, this is also an issue because we are concerned about sort of the environmental stressors, but also the psychosocial stressors of these wildfire events when they're occurring. Can be very scary, of course, especially if you have to evacuate from your home. But the kind of means to avoid smoke and to get away from the fire and to kind of to keep your families healthy may also differ by socioeconomic status. So this is something we consider. And so what we did, at least on a kind of California-wide level, was looked at kind of education and insurance type, and then also a social vulnerability index, which was created by the CDC and the Agency for Toxic Substance and Disease Registry, to kind of identify areas that would be the most vulnerable to to natural disasters, and where we should maybe focus some of our efforts to decrease exposures. So this index includes kind of socioeconomic status, household composition and disability, language and minority status. This is sort of outdated and also kind of not appropriate, but this and then also housing type and transportation. And the housing type and transportation we were particularly interested in because if people have to evacuate, that's of course an issue. Transportation is an issue. And then also with housing type, we're concerned about the smoke getting into the homes and kind of how that can impact people's health. So when we divided this kind of into the sort of high, medium, low of this vulnerability index, we did find that the effect of smoke on preterm birth was the strongest among those in the most vulnerable group. And we're still working on writing up these papers. We also found that those who were on Medi-Cal public or kind of public health insurance, which is more than half of the births in California, use Medi-Cal to pay for their delivery expenses. So these people were also at higher risk of being born preterm. And one thing I wanted to kind of mention about that we were interested in, especially with respect to climate and wildfire smoke, is that we are concerned about smoke getting into the house, especially in California, especially with temperate weather. We don't need such thick walls and sealed windows, or at least most of us don't have those things, because it's never too cold or usually not too hot, at least on the coast. And so sometimes the housing can be, very leaky. So older and smaller homes tend to be more leakier, and ones with crawl space. So we looked, and then one other factor was kind of cooling systems and swamp coolers, which kind of use outside air and in order to cool it and bring it in. It's particularly problematic during a wildfire event because then you're just bringing in smoky air and cooling it, which is not ideal. So we looked at all those other factors and none of them seemed to make a difference between the age and the size, but swamp cooling did show kind of also those with swamp coolers also showed stronger associations between the wildfire smoke and and preterm birth, which I think kind of does bring up kind of policy questions about what we can do to protect populations that are most at risk and have certain cooling devices in their homes to see if these things can be changed, especially as temperatures increase and cooling becomes even more of an issue, how we can have more weatherization programs. So there are some kind of policies underway, but I think there's more work to do to combat climate change and kind of adapt to it. And it's most important to do this in the areas where people are most affected and most in need. And so one other thing we plan to do in future work is to compare prescribed burns where people are intentionally burning to avoid these massive wildfires, and to be able to compare the health effects so that ideally that these can be managed more in a better way. And this was of course done more regularly when the land was occupied by more Native Americans and less immigrants to the area. And so kind of going back to what was done on the land before we all got here is one of the things that we need to do in order to kind of avoid these massive wildfires and huge exposures and all the health outcomes that come with that. We're also interested in measuring indoor levels of air pollution and provide filters for people who need them. We're also going to be looking at additional health outcomes and additional kind of factors that may be kind of also impacting this in conjunction with air pollution and wildfire smoke, things like income inequality and racial and ethnic segregation. And then we're also looking at additional biological pathways. So kind of more kind of smaller studies on people to kind of understand what's happening to the placenta, what's happening kind of in the body that might help us learn more about what needs to be done to combat these outcomes. So I just wanted to thank all my collaborators and funders and here.
Thank you, Amy. That was amazing, and a lot of good information that I know that I didn't know before. And one thing I didn't say previously, I don't know if we sent this in an email or not, but if y'all can share your slides with us, reply to any of the emails that I sent you with your slides, then we can send it out with the recording later after this event. So thank you so much. That was excellent. And now we're gonna move on, and we've been late, but now we're back on time. So thank you, Amy, for cooperating with that.
I was trying to move quickly, but I wasn't really keeping track of time, so I was just going fast.
No, you did excellent, excellent, excellent. Like everything always works out. The universe does it for us, right? So thank you. And Natalie's going to introduce our next.
Actually, are we going to
person.
take a break for a couple minutes?
Oh yeah. We could take a few minutes break if people want to grab a glass of water, go tinkle or whatever. We can be back at like in a couple of minutes. So do that real quickly, everyone. Okay, I'm back.
Thank you so much for your analysis and research, Amy. I'm really grateful to have learned so much. Our final speaker is Melinda Kramer. She is the co-founder and co-executive director of Women's Earth Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us. Please take it away.
Hi, everyone. This has been such a powerful day. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great.
Yes.
Well, I'm so grateful to be in a conversation about issues very close to my heart. I'm going to share my screen here and start with a little video.
We don't hear anything. I apologize.
So I'm going to share a little bit of story today as I talk about the work of Women's Earth Alliance. And I'm going to start in 2001 when I was attending the University of Nairobi, and I learned that a woman named Dr. Wangari Maathai would be giving a guest lecture. And I remember so well, I went to hear her speak, and she talked about her campaign to mobilize Kenyan women to plant trees. And this campaign would eventually lead to the planting of more than 51 million trees in Africa, engaging nearly 900,000 women with economic opportunities. And I still remember walking up to her after her speech, and I thanked her for her leadership, and she gave me this beautiful smile. And at the end of our conversation, she said, "What we need to do is simple. Just plant seeds, seeds of all kinds, and you'll be amazed at how they grow." And little did I know, I would see the same resolve hundreds of times in hundreds of women's eyes in my life. I went on to become trained in anthropology, environmental law, and international development, and I traveled around the world working in rural and urban communities from Alaska to China to Tanzania to the Russian Far East. And I would come to find no better set of instructions than those shining out from the eyes of a woman leader, just like Dr. Wangari Maathai. And I'd quickly learn that if I was committed to earth protection, there would be no better strategy to achieve that than to work alongside women leaders. I discovered that at the heart of every environmental and climate fight in our communities around the world are women showing up, committed for the long haul, more than a job, but more about taking care of our families and communities, and for the sake of Earth itself and future generations that would inherit it all. I would come to understand this inextricable link, age old, between women and the earth, one that binds us deeply to the impacts and also to the solutions. So this is a photo of WIA's first gathering in 2006. So this is 18 years ago. 30 women from 26 countries. We gathered to design an unprecedented initiative that we all felt really called to build. And you can see the photos out of focus. It's, very grassroots that we all made it there. But our small group had been doing this work for a long time, and we wanted to understand what the world would look like if women protecting the earth were supported and united. And so we came together to design this bold global initiative that would connect and resource and catalyze the work of women, grassroots women fighting to protect our environment. I remember we stood in a circle, that first circle, holding hands, and it was quiet. And one woman stepped forward and she said, "I've traveled thousands of miles across the world to be here, and I finally feel like I'm home." And I will never forget that. And I knew that this wasn't going to be about meeting quotas of women's representation or women as, target beneficiaries of massive international development schemes. We were there because we'd all seen that before. This was about meeting an urgent resource gap. We all had observed the same thing, though our contexts were all very different. We observed that women are underrepresented in decision-making, unrecognized in the media, and under-resourced in every way. And the worst part is that we were cut off from each other, doing this work without the solidarity of a network. And yet women were stepping forward, making things happen, being strategic and resourceful and collaborative. And so that's the model that we designed. And many of these original leaders launched our first regional programs that are happening today. Here's Dr. Wangari Maathai again in 2004. And I never imagined that first time I met her that soon she'd be delivering another speech years later, this time accepting the Nobel Peace Prize. This was a really big deal at the time. There were some who questioned what peace had to do with women's empowerment and environmental sustainability. And when we began, I remember we faced that same challenge. Dr. Wangari Maathai's recognition kind of affirmed our theory of change, that when women can play, a meaningful leadership role in our communities, bringing solutions in a holistic, inclusive, long-term way, that those benefits really ripple out, impacting every facet of society. So a few years after that, after Wangari winning the Nobel Peace Prize, I found myself listening to yet another one of her beautiful speeches. This time she was sitting around a circle with us at one of our first programs in Nairobi, Kenya, our African Women in Water training, convening women working in water, sanitation, and hygiene. Women from 8 African countries were gathered together to build safe water and sanitation, and to really build a movement, turning the traditional aid approach on its head by ensuring that African women who are carrying the burden of water on their heads, on their backs, literally every day, were designers of their own water projects, rather than having to inherit. We've heard this, inherit wells that are placed in the wrong location, pumps that are designed incorrectly for women to operate, or water privatization schemes that would leave communities with no economic independence. We wanted to do something different. And so Dr. Wangari Maathai, it was a moving time, her standing there with us, and she told us again about the power of planting one seed and watching it grow. And this is what she said. She said, seeds multiply, and so do your ideas. We are the ones that nurture, protect, and cultivate these seeds. And without your leadership, our earth stands no chance. And many of us were in tears hearing her call to action. And, over the 18 years that have followed, it's been an incredible journey. WIA has catalyzed over 35,000 women-led environmental justice projects in 30 countries. Through our programs, these are all decentralized, led by the vision, know-how, and context of leaders in these regions. WIA participants have grown their capacity. They have shared very tangible climate-related environmental technical skills and resources. They've built alliances, and they have delivered life-saving solutions to their communities. We saw this very, very strongly during the pandemic years. Solutions like safe water, sanitation, food security, clean energy, reforestation, waste management, and preservation of indigenous knowledge and lifeways. And the best part is, and this is the vision from the very beginning, is that we as leaders turn right around to create more circles, reaching more people with training and more communities with solutions, and ensuring that health, safety, economic stability, educational opportunities, and a well-being for thousands of people. And so, we focused on leveraging these key environmental issues because gender is a critical factor for each of these issues. Looking at food, women make up nearly half of the world's agricultural workforce and produce 80% of food in up to 80% of food in the global South. And the irony is that they own less than 20% of all titled land worldwide, and less than 1 in 5 landholders worldwide are women. So these small scale farmers who are doing the work of feeding our world, preserving traditional farming knowledge critical to our survival, are struggling to access the same extension services, training, inputs, and rights as their male counterparts. Water, you may have seen wild statistics. Women worldwide spend a combined total of 200 million hours every day collecting water, and much of that water is not safe to drink. And so that is equivalent to 22,800 years. Think about how many girls have missed school to take that walk, how many people were violenced on these long, arduous treks. Think about how much could have been achieved in these hours lost. Climate change. Women are 14 times more likely than men to die in a climate-related disaster. To many of our world's women, climate change is deadly because women around the world tend to be marginalized and lack access to resources. This is what we see. This is a report that we did several years ago with Native Youth Sexual Health Network, Violence on the Land, Violence on Our Bodies, Building an Indigenous Response to Environmental Violence. Women carry, and this was talked about previously, a disproportionate, what we call body burden of pesticides, pollutants, and chemicals in our body fat. And this is what we pass on to children in the womb or through our breast milk. So women are becoming receptacles of BPA, flame retardants, PFCs, phthalates, PVC, and heavy metals like lead and mercury. As Gudgy Cook, traditional Mohawk midwife, says, women are the first environment. We are privileged to be the doorway to life. We nurture and sustain the next generation. And yet each generation is also inheriting these toxic contaminants from our mothers. And finally, I wanted to present this report again. Safety, regions experiencing environmental destruction like fracking or mining have significant increases in rape, in assaults, and other types of violence against women. For example, in North America, and the report and toolkit here, did touch on this, the health of Indigenous women, Two-Spirit, and young people are extremely impacted by extractive industries. The data is there, and it's a human rights tragedy. North Dakota was previously one of the safest states in the country, and during the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline, employment in the oil fields attracted thousands of people into the state, and North Dakota had the 8th highest incidence of rape in the U.S. Fort Berthold, where the population more than doubled with this influx of non-Indigenous oil workers, reported absolutely record numbers of murders and sexual assaults, gun threats than the year before. And there are so many examples of this throughout North America and globally. And we really see this correlation. What we do to the earth, we do to women's bodies. And so in the in the fight for clean water and food security and breathable air, community leaders around the world are risking everything, putting their freedom, their safety, and their lives on the line to take on people and companies with far more money and power. And this story is not new. I want to go back to very, very far back to the long tradition of women's environmental leadership. This is a depiction of the original tree huggers in Rajasthan, India in the 1700s, when women of the Bishnoi community wrapped their arms around their sacred trees to protect the government from cutting them down for the royal palace. And many of those women lost their lives in the fight. And this inspired the Chipko movement in the 1970s, which again drew upon this peaceful protest method that spread throughout the country. There's Kenya's Greenbelt movement, women planting trees. There was the Bolivian water wars, of women marching in the streets against water privatization. These fights continue today. We know about them, we see them, and we feel the impact of these leaders stepping forward. Indigenous women in the Amazon, the tar sands, Standing Rock, Mauna Kea, and the West Berkeley Shell Mound. So women lead the majority of local environmental fights, despite what we're talking about here, persecution, deep, systemic inequities. As I mentioned, many don't own the land that they work to protect. They don't have a say in the policies that profoundly impact their lives. They don't have access in many cases to resources, to training, to networks of allies and other leaders who are walking a similar walk. And, we're all familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, where 193 countries agreed that achieving gender equity and women's empowerment is absolutely integral to combating poverty, hunger, disease, environmental destruction, climate change, violence, and unrest. But what we also are seeing is that this isn't really translated into action and an investment on the ground. there have been a number of analyses of grant making by foundations, women's funds, and other international institutional donors. This is one report showing that women's rights issues received less than 7% of philanthropic dollars globally, and support specifically for women and the environment at that intersection represent 0.2% of all foundation funding. And what this is indicating is several years old, but what this is indicating is a critical gap in support. And what hasn't helped is positioning women as beneficiaries in need of saving, of aid, of outside experts swooping in. We have seen many times how this backfires and kind of reifies these colonial constructs that have also been talked about earlier today. So what we have been asking in our alliance is, what happens if we flip this script? When women are accessing, financial resources, training, leadership opportunities, when they can advocate for their land and their communities. And what we found is that it is game changing. Some of you may have heard of this book, came out several years ago, measured and modeled and described the 100 most substantive solutions for reversing the buildup of atmospheric carbon within 30 years. And what they didn't expect to find was that empowering women and girls leadership is a huge contributor. Drawdown states the total atmospheric CO2 reduction of 119.2 gigatons that could result from empowering and educating women and girls makes this the #1 solution to reversing global warming. Drawdown solution also talked about what I mentioned earlier, women smallholder farmers. I mean, it's significant. Women produce 60 to 80% of food crops in some parts of the world. If women farmers had the same rights and access to these same agricultural resources as men, production could increase by 20 to 30%. And the number of hungry people in the world would be reduced by 150 million. Another big contributor is clean energy, ushered in through women's innovations. Around the world, 3 billion people cook over open fires, producing 2 to 5% of annual greenhouse gas emissions and leading to 4.3 million premature deaths each year. So shifting from clean cook stove to clean cook stoves can reduce cooking emissions by up to 95% while also protecting women's health. And a lot of these solutions within Women's Earth Alliance are being generated by women, shared through women's networks. Even the technologies are being innovated by and produced by women. And so these are the kinds of solutions that we're enacting at Women's Earth Alliance. We are identifying women leaders who are working at the grassroots, who are rooted in their communities, who have their finger on the pulse of solutions. And we are equipping these leaders with skills and tools. All the trainers in all the programs are women leaders in these communities who understand the nuances, who understand how to move throughout the community and activate change. And so in these trainings, women are learning technical, business, advocacy, campaigning skills. Women are also accessing money, seed funding to get behind those initiatives and those projects that they're bringing forth. There's also a tremendous amount of mentorship, such a critical part of the horizontal movement of knowledge and solidarity and exchange of skills and resources, best practices. And, we're building a global alliance by connecting women across geographies and issue areas, knowing that, these issues are not confined by our borders. They're not in any way siloed. In fact, they are extremely intersectional. And, these are kind of the cascading benefits that we see, this kind of concept that when we provide these kinds of inputs, everybody benefits. Women are empowered, children are safer, communities are healthier, natural resources regenerate, local economies prosper, regions stabilize, and this transformation that you saw in that video earlier can really take root. So I just wanted to finish by just telling a story, of a colleague of ours. This is Manorama Joshi, and Manorama is a seed leader for her community. She's a mother and a farmer, She's lived in her ancestral village in the Malnad region for generations. And she's also the founding member of our partner organization, Vanastri, a women farmers collective based in tropical South India. And in this region, chemical, agriculture, and climate instability are destroying forests, biodiversity, and destroying people's age-old control over their own food sources and medicinal plant traditions. Vanastri means women of the forest, and they promote forest-based agriculture and small-scale food systems through conserving traditional seeds. And through our Seeds of Resilience program, Manorama and the group established community seed banks and supported women farmers to become successful seed entrepreneurs who now grow and sell seed. And today, Manorama has been able to secure pay for her work, enabling her to pay off her farmers' loans, which is a big deal and very daunting task. All while she continues to organize seed groups, more trainings, the community seed bank, and the first seed festival in the region. Manorama was asked to lecture recently at the local university on her seed collective. And this was the first time a farmer, and a woman farmer at that, had been officially invited to the school. And here she is representing her community at the Organic World Conference. And as a result of this work, 21,500 farmers replaced agrochemical seeds with indigenous seed varieties, and new seed banks in the region have improved seed saving conditions by expanding seed storage capacity and introducing 14 new seed varieties. I mean, this is regional transformation. And best of all, 96% of women farmers participating in this program now have full authority over their farms. So we as work is all about building alliances and working to ensure that our best practices, the things we know, the things we observe, and the things we bring forth are not siloed, but that they are shared, and that the seeds we plant are able to spread. Because, I really believe that this ripple effect is real. And right now on Earth, we are all on the front lines. We are all community leaders who can usher in solutions. So all those years ago when Dr. Wangari Maathai spoke to me about planting seeds, I really didn't know that the seed she planted in my heart would someday grow into this inspiration for this network of action, the Women's Earth Alliance. And none of us can predict exactly how the seeds that we plant today will grow into abundance for future generations. But when we support the seed tenders, the knowledge keepers, the people who step forward with boldness and vision, we know that life has a chance to flourish. So thank you so much. And I really appreciate bringing this story to all of you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Another amazing presentation. And I love the fact that you're talking about seeds. So, because we never know, like the seeds that have been implanted in us by our parents, by our ancestors, by our, friends and family, how they are going to grow within us. Because I always say I never thought that I would be the person that I am now. And sometimes I don't even know who that person is, but because it keeps changing because of all the seeds that get planted. So this was really inspiring. Such an incredible morning, I swear. They never all of our virtual summits never cease to amaze me. They turn out great. And it's all because of everyone that takes the time to share their knowledge and expertise with us. So thank you very much, Melinda. That was amazing. So now we have time for some Q&A. So if anybody has a question, or you want to raise your hand and we can call on you. I don't know. I haven't been monitoring the chat, so I don't know if there's been any questions in the chat. But if you have a question,
I can review a couple points in the chat. Some of them were comments. One was just to underscore the line compost the empire. I thought that was a terrific line that, who said that? That was Ethos, I think, you know. So Ethos isn't still on the call, but that was a great quote. I wanted to ask them about that, to elaborate more on that. Somebody did explain what DARVO is, deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. I thought that was another expression that maybe it was Ethos somebody had used and they couldn't remember exactly what the acronym was. And another point in the chat is that Dr. Rupa Myra, who was referenced quite a bit, is right now being threatened at UCSF, where she teaches health disparities for her stance on Palestine. So please support her. So that was another comment in the chat. Now I have a couple of questions here. One, Nick, if you're still here, if you could come back on, there was a question, I think you kind of answered it in the chat, but maybe not everybody reads all that stuff. So the question was, let me see if I can find, what are your thoughts about encouraging folks to put their pronouns on their Zoom as company policy? You want to talk about that?
Sure, and I'll just reiterate what I put in the chat, and I just want to say super dope lineup of speakers. So props to the CMTF team, and just what a great way to do Friday. I think, you know, inclusion policies, especially talking in the workplace, are typically they're usually well intended. But I'll just underscore what I mentioned in the chat is that you don't want to force folks to potentially out themselves or out others. So, you know, when we're doing stuff, it can't just be tokenization, right? So you hear this a lot in the environmental movement around land acknowledgements, where are we just doing a land acknowledgement to check a box, or are we actually actively trying to dismantle the colonial and, you know, capitalist systems that are oppressing us? So are we actually just having folks put their pronouns in, you know, Zoom titles or other, you know, email titles, just to check a box on inclusion for grants or funding? Are we are we actively helping pay for healthcare for you know, trans, queer people? Are we making sure they have access to the facilities and bathrooms they want? So it's you know, there's symbolic steps and they're important for a lot of folks. But the biggest thing is that we're actually using these things beyond just inclusion and education, but actively dismantling the systems of oppression for queer and trans folks in our spaces. So that, just to underscore that. And thanks again for having me, Cheryl, and the rest of the CEMTF team.
Thank you. Karina, you have your hand up. You want to ask your question?
Yes, this is a question for Amy. So Amy, I was wondering, do you see newborns with respiratory problems immediately for both the preterm and the term, you know, when the mother are exposed to smoke heavily?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's something we're certainly interested in looking at. I don't think that anyone's looked at that across the population. I imagine that there have been kind of anecdotal episodes of that, but that is definitely on our list of things that we want to look at and to follow the children that were exposed in utero to see if they experience more respiratory problems. Either, you know, it's easier to follow them in the first year of life before they go off to different places, but yeah, that's certainly of concern and something we're looking at. I'm sorry, I don't have any data on that though to speak to that.
Yeah, I understand it's really hard to kind of control for different variables too. But thank you.
Thank you. Armando, your hand's not raised, but I see you dropped a question in the chat. Should I just ask it, or do you want to ask it? Full disclosure, Armando is my son. Yay. I'll ask it. He said he's also, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering about how, like, PM 2.5 leaves the body. Is it like something that just stays there forever, or does it clear out on like a certain cycle of time, or has that been studied?
That's a really good question. I think in some cases, when it's inhaled, it can get into kind of our bloodstream, and I think it does. I don't think it accumulates. At least we haven't found a way of measuring accumulation in the body. One place we do look for accumulation of it is in the placenta. So some people have done studies of that, because this is like an organ that then gets taken out of mother's body, at birth, and it's something that we have. But usually, we can't just check out people's lungs necessarily, or other organs, but this is one that we have kind of access to, so we look there more often. And there have been some, maybe I would say mixed investigations of whether the what's found in the placenta is kind of this filtered particulate matter that was inhaled by the mother. But yeah, that's a good question. Some does get ingested, some gets inhaled, and it does kind of in many cases make its way kind of out of the body. But the effects of what's in the actual particulates, like the kind of chemicals and things like that, can still have an impact. But when we think about it in comparison to something like perfluorinated chemicals or PFAS, those and some of the other chemicals that Melinda was talking about, that those stay in our body, those get stored in our fat. So PM 2.5 isn't quite like that, unless it's attached to these other chemicals. Yeah, hope that helps. Sorry.
Thank you. I see that Jack and Cheryl have their hands up.
Cheryl, why don't you go ahead? I'm just going to call attention to another point in the chat. So go ahead, Cheryl.
Good panel. It actually brings up a point that I was going to say. So thank you, Jack. Two things. One, when we're talking about the effect of, and I don't just speak about climate, but environmental justice when it comes to women, but especially Black, brown, and Indigenous women. There's a lot that happens, especially to the birth rates of Black and Indigenous children. So thank you, Dr. Padu, for this one. But I really wanted to ask all of the panelists, and Ms. Cheryl, you as well, to speak to, there was an article that was written about using language like protect the women and the children, especially in times of conflict and war. And this was especially prominent when it came to the conflicts that are happening not only in the Middle East, but Eastern Asia and parts of North Africa. And it's a big battle right now in not just feminist movements, but womanist movements, which is what is called in South Africa, in South America, and in African nations. And because of this global movement to not call women women, or to not use the term women, do you think, especially Dr. Padula, do you think that that is what is causing so much problems with funding for a lot of the medical issues that we see, especially in Black and brown women? Because there is particular de-emphasis on funding women's medical issues. Do you understand my question?
For the question.
Do you understand my question?
I don't have an answer for you, but maybe somebody
you understand
else
my
does.
question though, right?
I think so, yeah.
I go back to Sojourner Truth with Ain't I a Woman? And it keeps ringing in my ears every time I hear people throw this back. It's us about you can't have it both ways, and we're not getting the funding. And I think it goes back to semantics. But I would like to hear someone else tell me how we solve this issue.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to solve the issue. It certainly is an issue. I can certainly speak to that. I mean, I think women as a group, are undervalued, and that's represented in the funding for at least the medical funding that I think there's a I think I think one of your questions might have been, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to what extent to what we call women, or how, I don't know if it was because I had used the term pregnant people to be more inclusive. Okay, no, that didn't have anything to do with it, but to focus on women specifically, whether that, I don't know that that would make much of a difference with the NIH or other, fundings of medical research. I don't think that they're necessarily paying so much attention to our language, but that's what we use to be more inclusive of pregnant people. But I certainly share your concern and frustration about the inequities. If we got as much research as people did for things like prostates, we would be much further along. So it's about kind of who's in power and who's making decisions. And I mean, I think that's like changing slowly, but we have a lot of work to do.
I think what
We
I'm
have so
asking
much work to
how-
do on
yeah,
equality.
yeah. And Cheryl, I think you know how I am. I think I'm one of those
Yeah.
people that call a spade a spade. Is Black and brown women, pregnant women who are having an issue with getting the care that they need, which is why we keep seeing the mortality rate not going down. And our
Right.
reluctance to call it what it is not getting the care that we need, right? And we keep dancing around the issue. So that is what I'm asking you guys to address. Does that reluctance to call it what it is because we want to be politically correct is not resulting in aid in 2024?
We just lost you just froze on us. But I feel like there's so much work to do on the inequality between women and men, and funding in every aspect of life, really. There's so much work to do, and we have to keep up our fight. We're fighting for equality, we're fighting for justice, we're fighting for all kinds of things. And we can't stop now. Now we need to do it more and more and more and more. So I think, Jack, is your hand still up?
Yeah, I just wanted to call attention to, let's see, I start my video again. The point in the question in the chat that was kind of related to this was about education and family planning and the Project Drawdown and how that was the #1 thing. Now, Melinda had to leave. That would be kind of exactly in her turf. She was the one that talked about it. I just thought it was a really interesting statistic, and it is a good point. I don't think we have time to really answer it, but if any of the panelists wanted to respond to that, I think that would be nice.
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, well, we're kind of at the end of the day, so I just wanted to make sure people saw that, and it was a really interesting point.
Yeah. So we are at the end of our time almost. We still have a few minutes, but I just wanted to end with some closing words and thank everyone for again being here at Climate and Gender. I wanted to thank all of our speakers and all of our fellows. I want to thank Jack and Karina, our steering committee, and planning and logistics. And each speaker brought so much information, from Tatum to Ethos to Nick to LZ and Amy and Melinda. And it's just amazing all the work that we still have to do in this world to have gender equality and to understand today we went through so many terms, and I appreciated the understanding more about the two spirit and the three spirit and up to 5 or 6, that was incredible for me. And to hear about all the work that us as women who need to lead. And I'm doing what I can do. And I know that we're all doing our parts, and we have to embrace all of our communities, our transgender, our two spirit, our non-binary, everyone, because we have to show love and be love and love ourselves and love the person that we are today. And sometimes we have to make changes and to be better people. But we learned a lot today, and we need to embrace everyone. And I also wanted to thank Sabrina Jacobs for having me on the radio this morning to announce this. And I just also want to announce that in March, we're going to have climate and the prison industrial complex. So keep a lookout for that information. And we'll also be sending out the recording. And if folks want to fill out the evaluation form that Jack dropped in the chat, that would be great. It'll also be in the email when I send out the recording. And if the slides get to me, you can include those slides in the email that will have the recording. And all of our recordings are on the CEMTF.org website. So you can go back and listen and hear all the amazing virtual summit series that we had. And we also want you to look out for probably in May, if we find a location, for our 5th anniversary, because we will be 5 years old, February 9th, the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force. And we're grateful for that. And I'm also grateful for all of you that have joined us this morning and will join us again. And for those who have donated to the CEMTF, we're a small organization, but we're educating folks on all these different topics on climate that aren't always discussed. So look forward to the future with CEMTF and our virtual summit series and our 5th anniversary celebration. And you're all invited. Hopefully it'll be in person. And we're in the Bay Area, so hopefully we'll get a spot, and you'll be hearing about that soon enough. But thank you again for joining us. Thank you to all the speakers who did an incredible job to talk about climate and gender. It's been an amazing morning, and I hope you all enjoyed it too. Anybody else have anything to say before we go? Thank you. Thank you, Willie, for being here.
Great
And my
job.
sister's here, my husband's here, my son is here. It's a family affair.
Great job, you guys. Great job.
Thank you. Jack, did I hear you start to say something?
I just said thank you, Cheryl. You didn't thank yourself, so I had to do that.
Yeah, and it all works out. I say, like, I want to talk about subjects that we're not talking about, and then I want to let people decide how they want to contribute instead of us dictating how that should go. And it's just been an incredible morning, as usual. And I'm so grateful and thankful to all of you for that. So have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
We're still have COVID. So, still keep your distance, wear your mask, wash your hands. And, a lot of folks talked about Palestine today. So we have to free Palestine. None of us is free until Palestine is free. Get out in the streets. I feel like we're headed towards a fascist state if we're not here already. And we have to vote and we have to do our part. But if we all don't stand in solidarity and be united in the struggle, because one struggle is all our struggles. So free Palestine, free yourself, and enjoy love, find joy in these tumultuous times. So thank you again. Have a blessed day. Bye, y'all.